Let me thank everybody for tuning in. This is National Action Network's second monthly COVID-19 webcast. We're honored to have with us tonight a distinguished panel, and we are going to take your questions. First half hour, I'm honored to have one of our nation's outstanding public servants and a dear friend of National Action Network, United States Senator Cory Booker. We're also joined by Dr. Andre Perry, who is a fellow at Brookings Institution and author of the forthcoming book, Know Your Price, Valuing Black Lives and Property in America's Black Cities, and Dr. Khalilah Brown-Dean, who's an associate professor of political science at Quinnipiac University and author of Identity Politics in the United States. Let me start with you, Senator, since I know you have to leave in 30 minutes. The recent passing on Friday by the House of the Senate bill on the stimulus bill, many of us were concerned because Black businesses and small businesses did not get anywhere near their fair share of the first stimulus package, the $2 trillion. How do we safeguard that we get more of our businesses to get some of those funds? It goes live 10:30 tomorrow morning. What are the safeguards, and what are you saying to those that are business people that are on this webcast with us tonight that they ought to do at 10:30 in the morning?
So first of all, I'm grateful to be on and standing with you again for another NAN event. And I'm really grateful, Reverend Sharpton, that you were part of the activists that really were demanding that when we made mistakes in that first COVID fund, that big CARES bill at $2 trillion, as you said, a lot of it went into that PPP program, that those businesses that had banking relationships and banks that were willing to service them got connected. Now, African-American banks disproportionately are not using a lot of the larger traditional banks. Many of them are unbanked or are not connected. In addition to businesses, don't forget that also covered nonprofits and faith-based institutions. You and I both know my pastor here in Newark, New Jersey, his bank wasn't servicing those loans. So we had a lot of folks that were excluded that shouldn't have been. And so thanks to a lot of advocacy, we pushed hard to make sure that about $60 billion of that re-upped fund, of those $300+ billion, were going to be set aside and directed towards non-traditional lenders that more often service our communities. And those are minority depository institutions. Those are community development finance institutions and other more local, smaller providers. We also wanted to make sure that those providers were linking up with the SBA so that they could actually service those loans. And so a lot more has been done to make sure that African-American businesses are not being elbowed out, not as much as I would have liked, but a lot more than before. And so folks should call the SBA, should reach out to them. My website is going to have a lot of information because now, as you said, Reverend Al, it's a race to get those resources. And we want to make sure that African-American businesses that did not get, in a sense, their fair share are positioned now to get those loans and get that money.
Now, a lot of it was when they did come in last time, the money was already gone. Yes. By having this $60 billion set aside that many of us fought for with your leadership and others in the Senate and in the Congress, there's the $60 billion set aside, but they still need to go to your website or ours to find out where to go to apply so that they are not left out. They should not wait till Tuesday, Wednesday. Should be ready in the morning. It goes live tomorrow morning, 10:30. So they ought to go to those websites tonight to know where to go and apply.
Yeah, this is a race. It's a limited amount of money. You cannot wait on this. Do not sleep on this. I anticipate this fund is going to go very quick as well. So position yourself tonight, start getting the information, reach out to the SBA tomorrow, because in addition to the PPP program, they've also revved up something called the EIDL program, which is emergency loans, where you can get the money turned around in upwards of 3 days. So there's a lot of resources out there. It's going to go quick. And we just want to make sure, and that's why this is such an important night and such an important webinar. If you are a business listening to this, nonprofits, faith-based institutions, all of you qualify, and we want to make sure that you get in line to get these resources that are available.
So this is small businesses, faith-based businesses like churches that do community work, as well as nonprofits can apply, but they need to be timely because 60 billion can go fast when you're dealing with a national disaster.
Yeah, national disaster, 300 million Americans, states, every state, tens of thousands of businesses. And this is everything from a local barbershop or a pizza joint all the way up to mid-sized businesses employing hundreds of people. So we need to get African-American businesses. And remember, a lot of folks are probably thinking to themselves, well, I don't have a bank. Who do I go to? Remember, now there's community development financial institutions that you could be connected with that will service smaller loans. You know, again, I hate to keep using my Reverend Jefferson, but his bank did not service this type of loan. So he had to find the right banking relationship to get in line. And by the time he got in line, the money had run out. And so you have to make sure that you are moving quickly, connecting with the right financial institution. Now, there are ones designed to specifically help smaller businesses now so that you can get in line and get some of these resources.
Dr. Jamal Watson and Grace are going to field questions. We have any questions for the senator as we continue this conversation? Dr. Watson. Now I don't hear Dr. Watson.
That's okay. I'm gonna add something else in this. A lot of people might not think they're qualified, Pastor. I know this in churches, you got a lot of reverends here, but they employ people. And the Paycheck Protection Program is not businesses, it's anybody who's employing people, including nonprofits, including churches. So think about your church right now. And remember, it's not a loan. These are loans that can convert to grants if you keep your people employed. And a lot of churches will go to the mat to keep their people employed no matter what anyway. You might as well get these grant dollars. So I want to see that the churches are pillars of our communities all over the country. And we've got to make sure, and mosques, faith-based institutions in Newark, we got churches, we got mosques. Don't let these resources not come into our communities, because when those dollars come to African-American communities, which traditionally won't get their fair share, those dollars recycle in the community. They're employing people from the neighborhood. They're going out and spending their money at local businesses, which tend to often be minority owned. And so you may think, oh, we're going to tough it out, the church, what have you. No, this is what these programs are set up for, is to help people who are seeing a lowering of resources. And we know that this is happening in a lot of faith-based institutions, because people are being hurt by this economy. Often people aren't gathering at their churches to pass the collection plate. This is something to help you get through, because your institutions are vital to our communities. Please find out about this as well.
Reverend Sharpton, you're muted.
I'm unmuted now.
Yes.
All right. So again, Senator, if you get a loan and you keep your employees, that can turn automatically into a grant. I can't hear him.
Unmuted. Thank you very much. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. We're not doing a commercial for some cell phone company, but you can hear me now. So you have to keep a certain percentage of your employees, not 100%. I think it's somewhere around 90%. There's a formula. Some of that money can be used for overhead costs, utilities, mortgage payments, and all of that. So it's actually a very generous program. That's one of the reasons why it disappeared so quickly last time. And I want to call it out, Reverend, because you and I should call them out. Yes. There are a lot of people that took this money that should not have taken this money. We saw this Shake Shack returning money, Ruth Chris Steakhouse. These are folks, after lots of pressure, return the money. I've heard from businesses here in New Jersey that said their accountants came to them, oh, here, we can get you millions of dollars. Like, well, we don't need it. Our business hasn't been affected. But I know there's folks who have very connected, lawyers, accountants. Most Black businesses at a much much lower level than white-owned businesses in America don't start with no banking relationship. Money they've just, saved up themselves. And so a lot of folks just don't have those accountants and those lawyers and those banks that are telling them, take this money, take this money. So remember, $60 billion has been set aside, so it'll be a little bit easier, won't go as quickly. but you got to go get it. This is something that's not going to come to you. Reverend, you said this. I've heard you say this. Opportunity doesn't always come to your door and knock on it, wake you up out of your bed.
Right.
You got to get up and go after it.
Are you on with us, Dr. Watson and Grace?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Do you have questions for the senator?
Yeah, so next question is, that's sort of the long-term solution. If the senator has any suggestions about the long term, how are things going to be in 6 months from now?
Well, I want to ask something else, because we got some battles in Congress. And Reverend Jefferson, I talked to Derek Johnson, head of the NAACP, Mark Morial. These advocacy of our traditional civil rights organizations were able to shape this bill, working with Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and others. And so I just want to make sure that I know NAN has a bold agenda when it comes to our communities, but it is based upon the grassroots activism that we need right now. And let me give you an example, Reverend. Right now, states are threatening in New York, New Jersey, having to have layoffs.
Right.
Post office layoffs. Remember, those are jobs that are very diverse. In many ways, the pathway to a lot of the middle class for the African American community were government jobs. And so the state right now is in danger of having the post office collapsing under its federal weight, having states and local governments laying off firefighters, EMT workers, police officers, all of these jobs that get squished. I was a mayor during the Great Recession. Newark, Camden, all had massive layoffs, people of color. So we have to have an agenda to connect COVID to make sure that we are investing in helping state and local governments, investing in the medical needs of the African American community. And a lot of that is now, sir. There's a lot of people saying, oh, we've got to address structural inequalities in Africa. No, the house is on fire. We need to put more resources in testing, tracing, medical resources, access to healthcare now. Things like opening up Obamacare. So there's an agenda we have to have now in the legislation that's coming up, and before we start talking about 3 months.
Hello.
Yes. Yeah, Dr. Watson, are you saying something?
No.
Okay, you have another question?
So the next question is, if a church doesn't have a 401c designation, can they still apply?
So a 501c3. Yeah, there's are definitely needs for a church to qualify. So a 501c3 is important, but I think they should, on my website, they'll talk about the different tax filings for different types of organizations and which ones are actually. So again, if you have that 501c3 and that's how you are a faith-based organization, you should qualify. But again, this is information you can find out really easy. Please go to our mybooker.senate.gov/coronavirus or the NAN website as well.
All right, next question.
The next question is whether or not
Somebody needs to mute their phone.
no one has access.
Okay, good.
The next question is whether or not, Senator Booker, what's your prognosis on how this whole pandemic is going to impact the presidential election?
I thank you for that. I just want to say, Reverend, this is just like a family conversation in the kitchen. Lots of stuff going on all over the place. We're competing with a lot of noise. That's how it is. Listen, we know we have a problem before coronavirus with all kind of efforts to make it harder for Black people to vote. If our votes weren't so important and so valuable, we wouldn't see all these laws being put in place trying to restrict African American votes, as was said in North Carolina, being done with surgical precision to disenfranchise African Americans. Now, in the time of the COVID crisis, with African Americans being most vulnerable to deaths from the COVID virus, and imagine if we have a second wave coming around the fall, we have a real crisis in our community with getting a high voter turnout we're going to need to be able to send Mitch McConnell back to the back benches to be able to get Donald Trump out of that seat. And so we have to, because there's ways that they're doing mail-in ballots that could be hurtful to the African American community as well. We want to make sure it's postage paid mail-in ballots. We want to make sure that you have mail-in ballots where the signatures matching laws are written in a way they've been using them to try to exclude particularly minority voters. We want to make sure that mail-in ballots post dated by the day of the election actually count in the election, even if they were received after the election. So a lot of us are working on a real robust agenda for November's election. We were able to get $400 million into the first CARES package to help states prepare for things, but it's not nearly enough. And as you saw in Wisconsin, where I watched in Milwaukee, elderly African Americans being wheeled into those voting booths who are most vulnerable, we see that we could face states that are recalcitrant and not willing to do things. So we have got to figure out a grassroots strategy to getting people to vote, and we've got to figure out a federal strategy to use the power that was earned through the activism we've seen in the recent years, where we got Nancy Pelosi in a position of power and more diversity in the United States Senate than we've ever had. And you're muted again, Reverend Al. The operator, whoever it is, needs to unmute you.
The next question, I'll go to you, Senator Booker, is do these funds work for individuals who are small business owners but have criminal backgrounds?
Yeah, this is honestly, this is something that really is frustrating me, is that they wrote rules in a way that are very strict with people that have criminal backgrounds. And it's something that me and a lot of other activists were pressing on. And so don't just because you have a past criminal conviction, do not take yourself out before you even try. There's percentage of ownership rules that apply here, as well as distance since your offense or since your release from incarceration. So they are rules that I find highly objectionable and disproportionately will impact the African American community. Everybody who lives in communities like mine knows fellas that come home, ladies come home, so entrepreneurial and start up businesses, cut creators in Newark. I can tell you the places in my city that have that employ specifically look to employ ex-offenders. So it is a bad rule that the Treasury wrote in regards to people with past criminal conviction, but it's not a dead end. There are cracks in it in terms of just the provisions that we might want to analyze. So please go and find out. But I'm going to tell you right now, it's imperfect and it's frustrating to me.
Dr. Brown-Dean, did you have a question you wanted to ask Senator Booker?
Dr. Brown Perry?
Yeah, she's muted right now, Rev.
Okay, well then, let me ask this. I'm back on. You on, Dr. Brown Perry? Dr. Brown?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much. Senator Booker, I wondered if you could talk about, we've had all this focus on the national level. If you could talk to listeners about the importance of engaging at the local and state level, because while Congress has appropriated this money, it's really about the implementation that will have a direct effect on Black communities across our country.
Yeah, Dr. Brown, I really appreciate that. My pathway to the Senate was through a local leadership, and that's where so many of the decisions are made that really hit our communities pretty hard. And so everybody as an individual who's listening to me has to understand that you have a lot of power to affect how a lot is going to be implemented over the next year. We're going to see a very difficult year ahead of us. It starts, and this is a little an aside, but it starts with you filling out your census form, because our communities are undercounted. Therefore we get less resources and have less political power than we should have. And so you need to make sure that you take it on yourself. The deadline's been pushed back, but don't wait, go on now to fill that out. It's also understanding the decisions that are being made at the municipal level. And that's everything from what's going on with our municipal jails. I mean, right now you have people that should not be in jails all across America that are in dangerous locations. What's happening with our immigration lockups at the local level? These are a lot of decisions that are being made at the local level. I've talked to prosecutors during this crisis, many of whom are doing the right thing, I talked to a judge right here in Essex County where I live who's just not letting anybody in. If you've got nonviolent, any kind of thing, that she's just not going in. But those are local level decisions. You also have a lot of money given out that's called community development block grant money,
Right.
that is flexible to the local communities, that they get to decide what to do with that money. Well, again, this is your tax dollars. You should be influencing those decisions about community development block grant money. So there's a whole area where now more than ever, your activism and your engagement is so important. And Rev, let me tell you why it's so important. You know, I figure I'm on top of a lot of these issues, but every day I'm getting local advocates reminding me of something. I'm like, oh God, you're right. And I call my staff. Reverend, it was a day before this bill, when we were negotiating this bill, the day of the negotiations, and somebody just calls me up. Reverend Al, you and I have stood up on this issue about minority financial institutions getting a chance to handle a lot of these large financial transactions.
Exactly.
This is how millionaires and 100 millionaires are made, just because they hold the money for a little, pass it on here or do something. And a lot of those Black and female run institutions get better returns when they have the money in their possession. And I didn't even think about that. Somebody called me up and said, hey, you've got to think about trying to do this so Treasury doesn't only use the same old boys and the Fed and more. So I just cannot explain to everybody how important it is for you to make sure you have access to your local leaders, to your city leaders, state leaders, and even folks in positions like mine. That's why these webinars are so important to me, getting a chance to hear from the community and from experts like on this panel.
Dr. Andre Perry, do you have a question before we let the senator go?
Yeah, I have a question just in regards to the comment about the house is on fire. In the past, when the house was on fire, we still invested in people for long-term sustainability. The Depression, World War II, even the housing crisis, Hurricane Katrina. Is there a conversation at the federal level about a true stimulus package that will elevate people, not just in the short term, but for generations to come?
Well, you know, Dr. Perry, I can't thank you enough for that question, because you and I both hear, Dr. Perry, like people, well, I want to get back to normal. I don't want normal. We don't want normal in our communities. We've been striving for progress, and this idea that we're just going to go back to the things they are, when this disease has so exposed the inequalities and frailties in our community. What this should do is a time like when 4 girls died in a bombing in Birmingham. It woke our country up to the injustice that were there. Go back another generation, when women were throwing themselves out windows at the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire Factory. It woke. So this should be a time that expands our moral imagination, that expands our circles of empathy. You know, I'm tired of people talking about, oh, that's an essential worker, but they're being paid like they're an expendable worker. And so I'm going to be one of those folks, and I know I got a panel full of people that will be just there with me, if not leading ahead of me on this, is that we've got to start fighting right now to start expanding what the future is going to look like, to actually deal with what I consider horrific injustices. 28 million Americans without access to health insurance. The idea of health insurance as a right is now a national security issue. We should be talking about this outrage in America that communities like mine, communities of color, have incredibly higher rates of respiratory illnesses, because we have such environmental racism in our country, where communities have Superfund sites, incinerators, and more. We should be having a much wider conversation about shaping the future. And Reverend Al, why I so admire you is, you know, it all comes down back to that activism. The Congressional Black Caucus now is over 10% of the Congress. Think about that for a second. You know, we have got to start leveraging our voices and our votes to start making this a more beloved community, because the wretchedness of our community, those dark cancers, have all been accelerated by this virus. And so workers' rights, healthcare rights, criminal justice, all of these things, we've seen all of those dark spaces that were already existing in our communities have just festered and exploded and caused wider death and destruction. We cannot go back to a society that tolerates that level of sickness in the body. And so I hope this is a time of healing. I am going deep, Pastor. I wish you could come visit me. You see my books. I'm reading a lot of the great theologians right now, because I think the language we need, the poetry of the time, is really going to be based in a new moral vision for our country, because now we're starting to realize it is so connected to the economics, to our health, and to our national security. And so I've been doing my reading, just trying to, I want to be one of the people in that chorus that just speaks to this reimagined future and more beloved society that we can be, Pastor.
I know you have to leave us. Give us your parting words and remind us of your website, so those businesses listening, business people and faith leaders know where to go to get this information, so they're ready first thing in the morning to do what they need to do.
Booker.senate.gov/coronavirus. Booker, my last name, .senate, my position, .gov, government /coronavirus. Pastor, I'll leave you with this. Hurricane Sandy, I'm out in Newark. I'm the mayor, driving up a hill in the West Ward of Newark. I get a call. Stupid question. You've gotten this question 1,000 times in your lifetime, more than me probably, where an operator goes, would you please hold for the President of the United States? You never say no, Pastor. I don't know why they even ask the question. It's Barack Obama. I'm blown away. I'm out in the middle of a storm, surveying my community, and he and I talk, just two guys having a talk. As soon as I hang up with him, I get the phone rings, almost as if they timed it. It's Chris Christie, the governor. Now look, this is, again, I don't, Republican, Democrat, it's a storm is hitting. I talk to him, Pastor, we have a conversation, two guys checking in on each other. As soon as I hang the phone, I hit a hill in the West Ward of Newark, telephone poles down, live power lines, and I make out in the rain a guy in a slicker, yellow slicker with a floodlight, trying to wave my car past. I roll down the window, Pastor. He must have been 70-something years old, elderly man, black man, standing in the rain. I said, what are you doing out here? He goes, I'm not going to let any of my neighbors or anybody in our community go over these power lines. Pastor, I just talked to the president, the governor. That guy was showing how we have been strong through slavery, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, by standing strong in the storm. It ain't your title, it ain't your position. Your power is made manifest by how you stand strong in the storm for other people. That's the love, Pastor, you've been inspiring me with for years now, and I'm grateful for this panel. I just want to say God bless everybody. Together, we're going to get through this. You get information here, you hold it, and you don't share it with somebody. You don't call your friend that owns a business that couldn't be on tonight. You don't call that pastor you know, tell him to get this money. Then you're being selfish. We got to share what we know. Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you very much for being with us, Senator. We will certainly follow your counsel, and I'm glad you spent this time with us. Let's go to Dr. Brown Perry and Dr. Andre Perry. Let me ask you, Dr. Andre Perry, give us an overview of where we are now in the country in terms of the testing and in terms of the economic impact. As people that are tuned in to us, what do they need to know? Give us the context that we need to be active in.
Well, I'm going to provide you with some historical context just to lay out what we're dealing with. A lot of my research focuses on housing devaluation. On one study, I examined housing prices in majority Black neighborhoods and compared them to housing prices in white neighborhoods. I controlled for all of those variables. You hear people give reason for house prices are lower in Black neighborhoods. I controlled for education. I controlled for crime. I controlled for walkability and all those fancy Zillow metrics. And what we found, it pretty much astounds that homes in Black neighborhoods are priced 23% lower, about $48,000 per home, about $156 billion, which amounts to lost equity. Now that $156 billion is typically used to start businesses, to send your kids to college, to move to a better neighborhood. It's the money that people use or the municipalities use to fix roads, to provide schools and other services. So before the storm, before this epidemic, Black people were in arrears. And now that it is hit, Black businesses in particular will see severe consequences, and it will be amplified by those earlier conditions I mentioned. So a Black business doesn't have the wealth to lean on in these times. So they either go into further debt, close their doors, And then what happens to those workers? They have to go back into a job market that pays them lower, that does not hire at commensurate rates. There's this spiral that's going to happen. And that's one of the reasons why I asked Senator Booker about long-term strategies.
Right.
We should not return to normal. Going back to normal puts us back in the same recession-like state that we were before COVID-19. It's the same state we were in during the housing crisis, the same state we were in going back to World War II, the Great Depression. You know, we're always behind. And so the consequences of this are going to be severe, particularly for Black businesses who, once they close, they can't get absorbed back into the economy readily. I've been arguing for Congress to really start thinking about some of these long-term solutions, including ways to deliver monies to Black-owned businesses. Obviously, that's going to be a hurdle because the Supreme Court has weighed in on race-based initiatives. But there are other ways to get at place or ways to get money towards Black folk. Cory Booker is right. Community development block grants are a nice way that you can deploy resources to mayors so that they can determine how to use it. Cities need to create and establish some type of social impact fund so that they can provide funding for businesses. This is an area where also mayors need to leverage tax incentives. If you want a tax break, you have to be able to hire people who were let go during COVID. These
Right.
are the kinds of things that we have to look towards to, because quite frankly, we were in a recession before Black America being. We're going to be in a recession after. So the prospects are bleak. And I didn't get to the testing issue. In the South, where 6 out of 10 Black people live, they are not testing at the level that's needed to return to an economy. So we honestly don't know the state of Black America right now, because Southern governors, largely Republican, refuse to test and see where we are. In fact, they doubled down on trying to open up businesses that could actually accelerate the death rate. And so I'm very fearful at this moment in time, because the federal government is very consumed with acute emergent situations, and understandably so, the house is on fire. But if we do not address systemic structural issues, we'll be back in the same position we were right before this epidemic.
And is it not so that we can use this pandemic, as disastrous as it is, to begin talking about permanent restructuring? Because in this is an opportunity, as you've said, as Senator Booker just said to us, as I've been saying, going back to normal is the last thing we want. We need to create a new normal. And I think that is why it's important that we deal with the immediate in terms of the business loans tomorrow and the testing, but also deal with the permanent restructuring, where we are not considering it's just the way it is. We are normally the underclass and the discriminated and all. We are that until we decide we are not that. And that's what tonight is all about. Dr. Brown Perry, give us your overview and then we'll take questions.
So I think, Reverend Sharpton, if we look at what Black businesses are thriving right now, unfortunately, they are Black-owned funeral homes, because that mortality rate is so high, not just in the South, which some people may expect, but here in the Northeast as well. And so what does it mean that Black funeral directors are saying, look, whatever numbers you have, multiply that times 3, because so many people are dying in their homes because they have been denied testing. We're talking about people who have insurance and are still turned away when they seek out that treatment. And so when we think about businesses and the status of our businesses, we have to think about the communities that they work, What does that mean for a funeral home director who's trying to offer a family dignity in death, but that family cannot grieve the way they want to, or because they've been laid off or furloughed, they can't really afford to give their loved one that dignity? And I think it magnifies what we know from every natural disaster that has ever happened. If a hurricane strikes and you leave your home, you don't rebuild that home exactly the way it was before the storm. You fortify it. And you think about, when the next storm comes, how can we resist that storm and make it through? So this is a moment to understand that the two institutions in this country where Black people are overrepresented to our detriment is within our criminal justice system and within hospitals right now, where we see disproportionate rates of African Americans in this hospital. We can talk about pre-existing health conditions like asthma, like hypertension, but in too many areas of American public life, the chief pre-existing condition is racism. And so that affects which businesses can get loans. It affects the redlining of where you can purchase a home so that you can have some collateral to be a part of the American dream. And for too many people, because of these historical challenges and thinking about how we move forward in a way that is inclusive and not just business as usual, we have to have conversations at the local community level about what we are willing to do to commit and demand that change. As everyone has said, we cannot go back to business as normal. This is about a redefinition and also a revitalization.
Great, Grace and Dr. Watson, question.
Yes, I am seeing big businesses not willing to purchase from Black-owned businesses. Is there any way that we as Black people can develop our own web-based internet with the listing of all Black-owned businesses?
Well, we do have listings and networks of Black-owned businesses, but I have another suggestion I'll throw out at you. This is a time where city governments really need to change their procurement packages so that they put Black businesses on their procurement lists, so that they hire Black folks and contract with Black folks for their services. In addition, if big business is going to get these bailouts, we need to force them to build capacity of smaller Black establishments. And this is something that really bothers me. We're bailing out or giving big banks more resources. And while the number of small CDFIs and Black-owned banks are small, they could be made larger if fintech companies, if big banks lend their technology to Black banks and Black CDFIs. The reason why they can't take in a lot of the volume, because they're not built to do so. CDFIs and Black banks are high touch, low volume institutions that have high credibility with their consumers. But we need to build these businesses up. It's during these times, during times of disaster, when you see hundreds of billions of dollars poured into the economy, this is the only time where you really see capacity building types of events. If we don't demand that our institutions receive some of that drop, then we're going to be back in the same position when the inevitable crisis strikes again.
Let me say this before you address that issue, Dr. Brown-Perry, is that one of the things that NAN has been working on is that as we go through these political seasons, what Dr. Andre Perry just said is so important. We ought to be saying to mayors when they're running, to city councilmen or alder people, as well as presidential candidates, senators, and congresspeople, that federal money, state money, county money should be in our community and in our banks, and using our CDFIs and our businesses. Give you an example. When you look at the pension funds in your cities, these are your pension dollars. They are given to money managers in the white community, almost all white. They then lend that money to developers that gentrify and build developments in our community. So grandma's pensions is funding her own removal from her community. Because
Facts.
we do not demand, those elected officials say, if we are 26% of the population, why are we getting 0% of those pension funds managed by people in our community and going forward? Robert Smith, who's a billionaire that paid the student loans in Morehouse when he spoke there 2 years ago, he donated, based on what Cory Booker was talking about that NAN was doing during this last 2 weeks, he donated to some of the CDFIs and black banks the technology to expand so they could absorb your calls tomorrow, because they did not have the technological ability to do so. The reason they don't is we don't make our municipalities bank with them. Why isn't New York banking some money at Carver? Or why isn't in Chicago the black bank holding some of Chicago's money? It's our money. But we do not have those kinds of conversations with elected officials. We talk only certain policies with them and never talk about the money, and it's our money. You have labor unions that claim to be progressive, that take all of their pension monies and have white money managers invest your money, and it's your money because you're the union members. And I think we've got to start politicizing how we do financial business in the black community. Otherwise, we are going to be like hamsters just chasing our own tails. Dr. Brown Dean, please.
Well, I would say, Reverend Sharpton, that one of the greatest resources that we have, one of the greatest assets that we have would be our numbers. And if you look across the country, whether you're talking about in urban areas and how cities are managing this, but also in rural communities where you see large numbers of African Americans of small-owned businesses to be able to leverage that, to get to these pieces. But before we get to sort of the broader scope of forcing those municipalities, think about what it means that our young people have access to and knowledge of technology in a way that I never could have imagined. You know, my daughter can take my cell phone and create a video while I would still be trying to figure out how to download a photo. What would it mean if we took our social media platforms and started crowdsourcing those Black-owned businesses so that that info gets out? So instead of using our social media to complain and profit out myths and conspiracies, what if we connected those businesses so on a smaller level, people say, look, we all need to have a mask when we go out in public. Who are the local people in my community that are making masks so that my dollars go to a person and a business so that my dollar stays in my community? Instead of sending my money outward, how do I know that that investment I'm making will return for young people, for our senior citizens, for our homebound who have invested in us for years? How could we do that today? And that's something that can be done very simple, so that the people who know that the more detailed knowledge of these bigger financial platforms can be supported about how we make conscious decisions every day, every dollar, about what we are going to support, and more importantly, whom we support.
You know, Doctor, can I add to that in terms of the numbers? Let's remember that there are more than 1,200 Black majority cities throughout the country that have their own governments. Some are large, some are small. Many of them controlled by African American mayors. We have to leverage the assets that are in our control. And to Reverend Al's remarks, and that includes a lot of the money that we generated, that we saved. Some, again, going back to the fund management issue, but also the dollars that are being spent at the federal level. I always got to remind people, that's our money.
Right.
Our money. We're asking for it. No, we should be demanding the money that's supposed to be used in times of emergency. And we've been down this road before. And I don't want to hear anybody talk about they don't believe in reparations, particularly this time. If you took a $1,200 check, if you took a $500,000 check from the government, you better be the first one in line about reparations, because ultimately it was investments in poor people that got us out of the Great Depression. They just excluded Black people. The poor people they bailed out, the poor white people they bailed out then, have better capacity to withstand this epidemic today. We can do this again.
Questions, Dr. Watson?
Yes, a question from an audience member. Can the panelists talk about the impact on education relating to Black and Brown students amid the COVID-19 pandemic?
Let me go to Dr. Perry Brown on that.
Or it's either Dr. Perry or Brown
Sorry,
Dean.
Dr. Brown Dean. I think that's your name. I'm
Dr.
sorry.
Perry, I think our spouses might be a little confused right now as we go.
Let me apologize to your spouse. Dr. Brown Dean, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Reverend Sharpton. You know, this is an issue that is near and dear to my heart as a lifelong educator, and it is one that I don't think we are talking about enough. It's great to give kids Chromebooks, but if you don't help their families to manage that, you have done nothing but given them a big paperweight. The reality is that families are doing the very best that they can. They are trying to manage their home life while still working, while still trying to give some sense of normalcy. So if we know that we started the school year with Black and Brown children behind in terms of the commitment to their education and their future, this gap of months will have disastrous effects. So when we think about what it looks like to reopen schools, here are a couple of practical things I want us to consider. To rethink how we deliver education to young people. Not just think that by sitting in a classroom for 5 hours or 6 hours, that's learning and that's educating. It is not. I want us to think about as a community about what it means that if a kid is catching hell at home, it is no surprise that they act out when they go to school because that instability has been so prominent for them. The third key thing as we reopen schools, I want us to think about how we address the trauma that young people are experiencing because of this crisis, because they've lost loved ones, because their parents are out of work, and all of those fears that they have. When we talk about veterans coming back, we talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. For too many Black children in our country, it will be perpetual traumatic stress. And so what are the supports that we need to have in place? So it's not just about books and academic learning. It is about investing in their wholeness and their wellness. I would love to see some of our wonderful young people, our college students who were sent home a little early. I would love for them to think about how they can do more online tutoring or online support. Something as simple as a story time so that children know that we see them, we believe in them, and that whatever fears they are facing, we are willing to address that as we think about a plan for rebuilding, not just reopening our schools.
Dr. Perry, you want to add to that?
Oh yeah, there's a couple of things I want to add. One, know that we will be in a recession and there will be austerity measures that will impact education, because education in most states is the largest item on the budget. And so when they enter it into some kind of contraction, guess what they're going to do? They're going to identify essential workers. Oftentimes, those workers are the lunch ladies, the administrative support, the parent liaisons, all those different things. So we're going to have to fight to maintain state budgets so that Black people are not do not exit one of the major areas in which we work. And after Hurricane Katrina, where I was for 14 years in New Orleans, we saw a mass exodus of teachers. Some were fired. Let's remember that a lot of teachers were fired, but a lot retired early. So teachers 55 and older, we saw them leave the profession because the conditions worsened. Remember, before coronavirus, states, even Republican states, were making ground in getting teacher raises all across the country. That agenda must stay put because we're disproportionately in fields like education. So if the state contracts, then that's going to be bad news. So we have to fight like crazy. Then another thing that I think that's actually a positive thing, the use of technology during this period can be applied in the summer months when Black children really need it. Teachers know how to teach face-to-face. We understand that. But when they moved to technology, there were a lot of hiccups. Some districts didn't have the laptops to give out. They didn't have the Wi-Fi, the hot spots. But this is an aside. But they found them automatically. I mean, which was amazing. In Detroit, they're passing out 50,000 laptops, which raises the question: why didn't you pass them out in the first place?
Exactly.
But, well, let's move forward. But the point is that we've known about summer learning loss, summer melt, whatever you want to call it, for some time. It's because of a lack of wealth. Black folk do not have the discretionary funding to spend on camps that cost a lot of money. And so our use of technology, not to say that we're going to be in school year round, but we can actually stay in contact with students during that period. And clearly we're going to have to do something this summer, because we're looking at 6 months of kids not being in school. So we're going to have to do something this summer. But next year, the years beyond, we need to start transitioning to more use with technology to fill that void that's missing for many of our students.
Could I just add one thing here? And that is, watch who steps in to fill the gap.
That's
if
right.
Our public schools are unfunded. And we have to prepare for that now, whether those are charter programs that realize they can get a lot of money.
As privatized charter programs.
Exactly, privatized charter programs that can make a lot of money with very little accountability, with little cultural understanding of our children and the kinds of issues that they face every day, that have now been magnified by this crisis. Watch for that, guard against that, and speak up. Speak up now, so that when people are thinking about how they can get federal money to open private charters, guard against that, because we already know how people in the administration feel about that. We can't wait. Our babies cannot wait for us to be surprised. We have to plan now.
We have a Secretary of Education now who doesn't believe in public schools. So that is an immediate danger right now. Dr. Watson, Grace, next question.
Yeah, we have a question from a business owner in Atlanta who says that with the stay-at-home order being relaxed, they feel very conflicted because, of course, they want to get back to work, but they also know that it's quite dangerous to do so. Do you have any recommendations or suggestions on what they should do?
Yeah, well, people don't know this. Only 1 in 5 Black people have the opportunity to work from home. We are so concentrated.
Say that again. Only 1 in 5.
1 in 5. Only 1 in 5 people Black people have the ability to work from home. People like me, professors, or maybe a journalist, managers. Only 1 in 5. And so we have to work, and either we're in a field, an occupation that puts us on the front line of the disaster. Now, 29% of all Black-owned businesses with paid employees are in the healthcare and social assistance fields. So we are right there. So we're working in this midst, in the midst of the pandemic, that puts our lives at risk, or we're in fields like or we own barbershops and things like that had to be stopped because of social distancing. And so, man, we're in a tough spot. But I will tell anyone, protect your life. You know, we will get through this if we demand what we are owed and what we are due. But you're putting your life at risk when you go into an area that is not safe. And it's hard for me to say because I have the privilege of working from home, but there are lots of people going to work every day because we have to, and they're paying the ultimate price for
it. Dr. Brown.
I think that, you know, what was just said was really important. And I think it's a moment for us to take a step back and look at the fact that capitalism makes us determine, do we value our lives or do we value our employment? And it is a tough position that too often Black folks find themselves facing in ways that others cannot. When we talk about this notion of a frontline worker or an essential worker, often we don't think about the high number of Black women working as home health aides, as certified nursing assistants, who don't have the PPE that they need in health facilities to stay safe. So when I think about people walking into a barbershop or a nail salon, how likely is it that they will have what they need to protect themselves, to protect their customers, and avoid, if you want to talk purely money, avoid the kind of liability that will happen if someone gets sick or contracts the virus in your business? Because all of us are connected to people who love us. What will that mean if we make our families at risk from this, or unfortunately get sick with it? So if people, that's a choice they have to make. I will say there is no place in this country right now, as of today, where we have seen enough of a decline in cases to effectively and confidently say it's time to reopen. Also remembering, as we said at the beginning, Reverend Sharpton, there are large groups of Black folks who have not been tested, who have been denied testing. So when we hear about 50% of deaths in Mississippi being African Americans, that's what's reported and that's what's documented. We know those numbers are higher.
And those are the ones that have been tested, where the overwhelming majority of Black folks have not been tested. So if we're disproportionate and we are talking about a small percentage have been tested, it's worse than that if we had a larger testing capacity to deal from. Next question.
I just want to add one thing, but we're seeing where we should be federalizing workers, right? Our Grubhub drivers should be federalized at this time. If we're saying that there are essential workers, these are the people we should be testing first. And then if they are cleared to work, let people work, but also give them the benefits that are commensurate with civil servants. Because it's clear that they're also vulnerable because they don't have the health insurance that privileged people have. They don't have the banking system that rich people have. And so we have got to figure out ways to get people the benefits and services that you and I enjoy.
Right.
But they're not there. But the Grubhub workers, the grocery store clerks, a lot of the different types of workers who have to work, but they're just not protected.
Next question, Dr. Watson or Grace?
Yes, next question is, are you hopeful that after the pandemic is over, there will be a political discussion around universal health care for all?
Either one of you.
I think we're hearing that right now. A lot of people who were opposed to universal health coverage all of a sudden think that it's ludicrous that they don't have the kind of access that they thought they did. And it's amazing what happens when people all of a sudden who thought they were secure realize what it truly means to be vulnerable in this country. And so that conversation is starting to happen. The challenge, however, is that often in the US, we can have a very short attention span. We are always one tragedy away from forgetting what has actually been happening, and what will continue. So I hope that we don't wait to get through this pandemic to have that discussion. I think those discussions need to happen now, but even more important than just a discussion, it's about getting people into various positions of power, authority, and elected office to make that happen.
Yeah, and it's not just about universal health care. This is about a basic income, a basic living wage now. We're talking about federal job guarantees. These things are at play because it's ostensibly, it's obvious that we need a different kind of social safety net. Baby bonds should be part of the discussion. We need to really rethink what it means to what Social Security means moving forward. And I just have to repeat this over and over again. During the Great Depression, an analogous situation, we provided a social safety net that supported white citizens for generations. We've been down this road before. We can do this again, but include Black and brown people in the package.
Adding to that, let's not forget that when they started this country, they gave land to people to come and become a part of these colonies. Reparations is as old as this country has been, but when we ask for it, we're begging, which is why when we're demanding things like our municipalities to use our money managers or deposit with us, we're not begging, it's our money. If I'm in Dr. Perry's house or in Dr. Brown Dean's house and I use your stuff and you say, I want to have a teaspoon of that, and I'm saying, why are you begging me? I'm using your stuff, I'm not begging. This is our money.
That's exactly
Dr. Watson, Grace, give me the next question.
Next question is from a Black farmer who says that he feels that Black farmers have been left out of this discussion and wanted your observation about that.
Man, I mean, but this is historic. Black farmers have always been left out of the major relief bills. I mean, and it's only taken individual freedom fighters, activists to really sue the government when they've been excluded. That's how Black farmers have been got their redress. But you are absolutely right. They've been devalued and ignored throughout this entire process. But again, that occurred before this pandemic, and so that's something that we got to work on.
One of the things, and you're right, we've got to really prioritize that, and I think that's something that we have not done. But one of the things that comes to mind, we've been all over the country with NAN doing these prepackaged food, giving away. Our relationship with the World Central Kitchen and now CARE, while they are actually paying farmers to just kill their produce, they're getting paid to get rid of food, while you have these food deserts in our community. And Black farmers could fill that void and wants to fill that void, but they've not been included in this discussion or in the legislation. And all of us are guilty of not doing more than that. I pledge that we're going to bring that to the fore, since we're in the conversation now with Treasury and with the Congress and the Senate. That's a very good question. I'm glad he brought it up. Next question.
Are you concerned about the future of our historically Black colleges and universities? Will they be able to survive?
Yeah, I will say that before this crisis happened, there were a number of our historically Black colleges and universities who were struggling, while there were many others who were thriving. I think this is a time for a conversation about the why, not just the what, but the why. When you look at how many of our students attend HBCUs because they were able to navigate that process, that those schools were able to give them the funding that they needed to be the first in their family to go to college, or, you know, the 5th generation graduate of the college of their choosing. As someone who works in higher education, I'm concerned about the future of higher education writ large. But I also know that unless we start addressing the unique challenges and also opportunities of our HBCUs, many of them will not weather the storm. And so as we are thinking about what it means to reopen, when we reopen, and how we do it, we have to look at those unique situations for our HBCUs. And most importantly, alumni need to raise their voices and demand that people in positions of decision-making listen to them and are attuned to what HBCUs matter, not just for students, but for entire communities.
You know, the private HBCUs are particularly in trouble, largely because, let's remember, 75% of students in HBCUs are Pell eligible.
Right.
They're poor. So, and private HBCUs are very dependent on tuition. And there's been a movement afoot for the last few years. People are going to college less. They trust college less because the price of college keeps going up, and it impacts disproportionately Black students. And so we're going to have to figure out, again, this goes back to the social safety net. We should have free college, but that we should have Pell grants that are commensurate with the costs of college. With that said, we also need a conversation about controlling costs at colleges and universities. That's very real. But I worry about the private institutions because students are probably not going to go back at the same rate they were before the COVID. And you're seeing this. People are waiving admissions processes, and they are waiving fees because they know they're going to see a drop off, and that's disproportionately going to impact our HBCUs. So when we're talking about recovery packages, we need to really beef up the awards, the packages that go to state for state schools, but we also need to beef up the package going to private higher education.
All right, next question.
There's a concern that with this pandemic taking so much attention and focus, that some of the bread and butter issues relating to civil rights, like voter disenfranchisement and police brutality, those issues are falling by the wayside. How do you negotiate and navigate both?
Yeah, I will say that Black communities have always been about both and, not the either or. And this is a moment where we have to pursue that. So we can talk about how COVID-19 is having a devastating impact on our community. But we can also address that many of the reasons why that disparity exists is because of these long-standing problems that were just mentioned in that comment. All of the concerns about voter disenfranchisement, about people waiting in long lines and putting their health at risk in Wisconsin, about the actions of some states that are happening right now, where they are putting in policies into place to undermine access and also undermine where people can vote and how they can. And what I would say is that there's enough work to be done for everybody to pursue the lane that they want to. We need that. And it's also why it's so critically important that people register and that they vote this year in every single election, not just the national level, but those key local and state elections. When I vote, I don't vote based on the candidate that I like. I vote based on the people and the communities that I love. And that means prioritizing what those issues are, not waiting until we come out on the other side of COVID to raise that, but to empower people to pursue that and understand that inequality, that difference, opportunity in this country is all nested and intermingled.
You know that all these things are interconnected, and we have no choice but to deal with them at the same time. The stories that have come out of Black people wearing masks and getting harassed by police is a great example of how we still need to stay on top of police harassment and brutality while dealing with COVID-related inequalities. We have no choice but to deal with all of these things simultaneously.
I think you're right. Both of you are right. It is not either or, both and. And let me say this. I think Dr. Perry, you alluded to it as well as you, Dr. Brown Dean. When we do come out of this, in terms of the immediate threats, we are going to have a serious stretch of time where our community will be under siege because we'll be highly unemployed. Many of us, education institutions closed. We are going to see a magnifying of these issues. If you think it was bad before in terms of voter disenfranchisement, there is nothing that the Trump folk won't do to try to disenfranchise voters in November, because they are now panicking because the pandemic is a bad political sign for them. And this doesn't stop just at Trump. It's the Republicans all the way down the line. There's numerous articles out today about how they feel the Republicans will lose the Senate and all the way down to county offices. Police brutality, something NAN works on all the time. Any kind of encounter can happen now when you have young people in the streets, no school. These things are going to accelerate. We have no choice but to do both, and we don't have the luxury of saying we'll deal with that after the pandemic. It's going on right as we speak, and it will accelerate once people are back in the street and the institutions are not open. Dr. Dr. Watson and Grace.
Yeah, a question of what are some of the ways that we can galvanize individuals to go ahead and register to vote? It's hard to do so given that there's limited contact that we can make. Or do you have any suggestions on how we can mobilize voters?
A very easy.
Let me start that one. The same way you get on line and come up with all these conspiracy theories and reality shows is the way you get online and start talking about voting and how your kids are home and there's no school. I mean, we need to flood the line, our social media, and quit gossip and start dealing with some realities. The fact that we all are home means all of these social media outlets, all of these cable news outlets, all these radios have a larger amount of people listening. Use that as organizing tools. I can tell you, as one that hosts a television show and a radio show, our numbers are double. So our message ought to be doubling down.
Yeah. You know, and Reverend Al, this is also a time for us to argue for things like universal voting. That, again, we need to change the structures that are prohibiting us. And there have the state-to-state effort to suppress the Black vote needs to be eliminated. Now, certainly, we may not be able to do it for this election, but it should be on the political agenda as a mobilizing tool.
Right.
That we should be rallying people to say, hey, we can create a holiday, an election day holiday, where everyone can have the vote. We can automatically register you. There is nothing preventing us from not registering you, except for the inability to suppress Black vote. So this is an opportunity for us to expand and change the way we vote moving forward. And I think that should be the way that we rally people to say, we got to end voter suppression.
So I'll say in the short term, the easy thing that people can do tomorrow. So after you have gotten your application through for that business program,
Right.
Call your local registrar or call your Secretary of State and you ask them, what is the policy? What is the plan so that I can register or so that people in my neighborhood can register? Because again, that varies state to state. You can call them and demand that people have no fault absentee ballots, that they can be able to do that. Those are short-term solutions. Thank you. So they muted me. They didn't want to hear me, Reverend Sharpton. So there are short-term things that people can do. And what I will say is that we have to claim our power. We have to stop guessing and stop giving away our power. We are a people born of power, and we have to harness that. That means not asking for, but demanding access to that ballot at the local level and at the state level. Talking to your older family members about how they can get access to absentee ballots as well. Think about how quickly some of these governors jumped into action once they had to move their primary date. That's the urgency.
And let me add to that.
You know, who the Department of Register will get that money right.
Since most of you are in shelter in place, ask everybody in your house, are they registered? Start a registration drive in your house. That niece, that nephew, that's on your nerves because y'all been in the house 3 weeks, your uncle, your mama, your daddy. Start registering right now, everybody in your house tonight. Get them ready and get that information. Watson.
After our 3-day getaway.
Foreclosures and housing crisis again after the pandemic.
Oh, well, you're going to probably see a rise in foreclosure and other evictions. So we're going to need policy to prevent that. As you know, after the housing crisis, it was Black homeowners that suffered more and did not recover at the same rate as their white counterparts because of the lack of wealth. I expect the same thing to be true. They're also tightening the amount of credit. So it'll be harder for Black people to get the kind of mortgages that will set us up for success. So housing is going to be a big challenge moving forward because affordability has already decimated our communities, pushed us out of some of our major cities. And so that's an area that it's going to be a challenge moving forward.
So the same way that I said, watch for who steps in to try to solve the education crisis, watch for who steps in to try to exploit and take advantage of the housing crisis. Post Katrina, who came in to buy up neighborhoods and redevelop in New Orleans. And that has had a decade-long effect that will have even more. So unfortunately, many people will not be able to maintain their homes. And if we are not vigilant now by requiring these municipal understandings and agreements, this crisis will rebuild our neighborhoods in a way that we do not understand. So now is the time to put agreements and structures in place to counter them.
Dr. Watson, next question.
The next question is one that's a bit political, and that is thinking in the presidential election, how might Democrats, more specifically Joe Biden, handle a crisis of this magnitude?
Well, I think the first thing we need to ask is how we gonna handle Joe Biden if he's the nominee. I think that we need to have an economic plan that includes the things that we're talking about tonight. And
Somebody did this on purpose.
I think somebody's interfering, but we're going to ignore that. I think that obviously somebody's trying to do whatever, but we've gone through more nonsense than that. So we're going to keep going. You only have a few more minutes either way. But I think that what we must do is we must lay out an economic agenda, and that must be agreed upon as we go forward. Because unless we not return to, but we initiate a new normal, none of this will be resolved. We'll be waiting on the next disaster, and we'll be right back here again. I don't hear Dr.
Any others want to weigh in on that issue?
They cannot hear, they're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you now.
Okay. So remember that Joe Biden is a centrist. There is a probability that he's going to try to go after folks on the right who are peeling off of Trump. And that does not spell well for African Americans. We put him in this position. He's going to have to deliver. I'm a big fan that he better elect a Black woman as vice president. I mean, I just believe that. He's going to have to, and he's going to have to go beyond that kind of representation and actually introduce policy to address many of the things that we talked about today. So Reverend Al is absolutely right. We gotta control him. That if he's going to be the nominee, he has to address our needs, and that's the perspective we should be taking.
Yeah, we cannot afford to be content with just having a seat at the table.
Right.
It's time for us to have seats at the table. And Reverend Al, if people are not willing to make that happen, then it's time to flip the table and not accept the status quo. The reality, the hard reality on this Sunday evening is that Black folks are dying because of indifference to decades, centuries of indifference that has created the situation that we are in. But what I also know is that power concedes nothing without a demand. Now is the time to have the conversation. What are we demanding of a president, of a candidate, but more importantly, of ourselves? What are we willing to accept? What are we willing to do so that our children have a better opportunity than we have right now, no matter how good your life situation is? That means being very clear on the policy perspective about what a plan for economic rebuilding must look like. What a plan for public education, given that the majority of Black children in this country are educated in public schools. What does that plan look like? Not in terms of curriculum, but in terms of the people who are in cabinets and in administrations and are on the front lines to implement these kinds of things. And then lastly, we cannot accept broken promises. If I ask you what you're going to do on these policies and you don't have an answer, then you don't deserve my vote. And again, that's not just the presidential candidate, that is every person who steps in front of you, who shows up at your church of house of worship every 2 years begging for your vote. If you don't see them the day after the election, then you have thrown your vote away.
Absolutely. Next question.
Most low-income people will cash their stimulus check at a check cashing institution where they take money out for using that institution. I have a credit union and bank account, so I don't have that problem. But how can we achieve more financial institutions like credit unions and banks in low-income neighborhoods?
Yeah, we talked about a little bit about this earlier. This is where we need to build the capacity of Black-owned banks and CDFIs, and also continue to regulate an industry that preys upon poor Black people. That, again, this is another instance where we both have to address issues of the past while in this emergent moment. And so, yes, folks will try to cash their checks in places that will take a larger percent. And I can't remember if the bill in the CARES, if there was action in the CARES Act to prevent predatory sort of action in that. I'll try to look for that, but we have to curb that kind of behavior while regulating that entire industry and building capacity of Black-owned institutions.
And let me just champion again, local and state level action can have a tremendous impact on this, so that your local municipality or your state can have language in its regulation that limits the kind of interest that these predators can charge. And that may not help people right now today in terms of having that. But if we know nothing else, we know that this is not the last crisis that we will face as a community and as a country, but we need to do those things to address our reality and also prepare going forward.
Let me add to that. I think the regulations are important that has been raised by Dr. Brown-Dean. But I think that, as well as what you said, Dr. Perry, but I also think everybody needs to ask their municipality and their state how much of the taxpayer dollars in their state or municipality is in a Black bank or a Black financial institution. Why are all of our dollars being put in the major banks and it's our money? Every Black church, imagine if every church banked at the same bank, it would expand the financial opportunities to do mortgages, business loans. We all are members of churches that bank with people that won't give us a mortgage or that won't give us a business loan. Many of the things that we need to do, we can do ourselves if we just organize ourselves around it.
And can we
go ahead, Dr.
Can we just add I want to be clear with a number on that, because women and people of color only manage less than 2% of that municipal capital, only 2%. Now, we should at least demand that from cities that 30% of the funds are, at least 30% are managed by people of color and or women. It can go higher, but to certainly to go from 2 to 30 would be an accomplishment. So it should be at least a third of of our money that's being managed by us.
And then we can take it, and I know we're out of time, but then we can take it to the private sector. I remember we had on the National Action Network, a Madison Avenue initiative. I met with a CEO of a company and said, why are you advertising only on white-owned radio and television, and 33% of your consumers are Black? He says, well, no, since I've been CEO, I increased the advertising of Black-owned media from 5% to 7%. I said it ought to be at least 33% if we're 33% of your consumers. We spend money with people that we don't force them to spend money with us. And we need to start with those kind of basic campaigns. Let me ask Dr. Perry and Dr. Brown-Dean to give us closing statements.
Yeah, I have a new book coming out, Know Your Price, and the title of that book comes from my favorite play, Two Trains Running, in which the main character, Memphis, it's a play by August Wilson, by the way. The main character, Memphis, is about to have his business taken by the city of Pittsburgh through eminent domain. The city of Pittsburgh offers him $15,000. He says, I'm not selling my property for $15,000. I got my price. I know my price. And it's a refrain throughout the play. There's another character, Hambone, who paints a fence for a ham. He paints a fence, he never gets his ham until he goes crazy and dies. There's actually a happy ending. The main character, Memphis, gets $35,000. And the moral of the story is you have to know you have worth. What I try to do is give people a price to stand on, even if it means going crazy and dying. That at some point we're going to have to demand change. That these things that we mentioned all throughout the day is just not going to come. You know, power concedes nothing. That was mentioned earlier. That at some point we're going to stand up and demand our price.
Thank you, Reverend Sharpton. I too have a book that's already out. It's called Identity Politics in the United States. But the thing that I would simply say to people on this town hall is to claim your power, consecrate that power, be convicted by that power and walk in it. As the late Elijah Cummings once said, I want rivers of justice and oceans of fairness. That's all I want. And as we come through this crisis and prepare for the next one, that's all I want. So thank you for the opportunity to be with you this night.
Well, let me thank the two of you. Let me thank Senator Booker for spending 35 minutes at the beginning. We're sorry for the glitches, even if it was somebody sabotaging. We went through it anyway. It didn't work. And let me say that I have a book coming out too called Rise Up. Movements are not started from the top down. It's from the bottom up. We lionize and make icons out of people like Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks was an ordinary woman that had an extraordinary sense of what to do. She was not an orator. She was not one that went to Ivy League schools. She just sat in the way and change happened. Everyone watching should figure out how you can sit in the way of what is going on by using and exercising how you spend your dollar and your vote. Do not go back to a normal life. You've learned under this pandemic what you could do without. Don't go back. Don't be waiting so you go back to what you used to do. Say, you know, I've learned during this shutdown what I can do without. Now add some positive things that you can do with, because the change agent you're looking for is you. Don't look on television. Don't look on the radio. Look in the mirror and see where you can become part of the change agent by disciplining yourself, how you spend your dollars and how you demand something. If you start that, it will spread and it will become something that will help us change things. Only the masses are going to free themselves. Slave masters never change their minds. Freedom comes when the slave changed their minds about having slave masters. Thank you for being with us, and God bless you. Stay in touch with what we're doing, www.nationalactionnetwork.net. And you that are businesses or nonprofits, in the morning this thing goes live. Be on it early. Don't be standing up there with the old blues song, tell me how long the train been gone, the money's gone. Do it early and get this in. We fought to get that $60 billion. It's got to come to our community. I thank Dr. Jamal Watson. I thank Grace, and I certainly thank Dr. Perry, and I thank Dr. Brown-Dean, even though half of the web there, I was calling you something else. My apologies again. Good night. God bless you.
Bye-bye.